history is a remarkable one. But today, Huawei finds itself facing allegations and scandals that can potentially threaten its long-term growth. So what does Huawei do now? How does it react? Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ruchi, and these are my teammates, Zahal, Sam, and Jeremy. And today, we are here to answer exactly these questions. So let us first take a glimpse of where Huawei is today and its remarkable success story. So Huawei is a privately owned Chinese company which has become the world's largest telecommunication company in just over 2 decades. And we can see a very healthy revenue stream which has only grown from 2003 to 2014 from 2007 billion USD to 46.5 billion USD. And the reasons for this success is nothing but the international expansion which Huawei has taken as a core business strategy, and they do so by something they call globalization, which is an amazing strategy. It's a 3-pronged strategy which basically consists of consumer-centric innovation, localized operation, and also commitment to the long-term potential of its local partners. So what we have seen is that the effects of this globalization strategy has led to 70% increase in revenue for Huawei in the international markets, and also 50% increase in the brand name of Huawei and the recognition that consumers associate with this company. So now, Canada is the latest international conquest for Huawei, and let us see how that goes for the company. Huawei started its operations from China, and then it went on to conquer Asia, Africa, then it moved on to US and Europe, and now Canada is their focal point. So the vision for Huawei is to become an integrated Canadian telecommunication ecosystem in Canada. And how does it do so? It wants to leverage on the global leadership position of the company, and also the low-cost proposition that only Huawei provides. And therefore, we see Huawei adopting a business model whereby they are present in 3 different segments. The first being enterprise, the second being carrier, and the third is retail segment. The carrier, one thing to note is that carrier is the company's focal point as of today. And there are 2 key competitors in the market, in the Canadian market. The first is Ericsson, and the second is Nokia Siemens network. So what does all of this mean? What are the opportunities in the Canadian market, and how has Huawei tried to tackle them? So the first opportunity is the sound economic conditions that we can see currently in Canada, and the second is the sparse land that Canada provides, which is now currently without telecoms communication. We are talking about the rural areas which do not have the networks, and there is immense potential for Huawei to go in there and capture that market. And what has Huawei done till now in terms of investments in Canada? Firstly, it has an overall 500 million Canadian dollars of investment. So about $200 million goes into new researches in 5G initiatives and also cloud computing. And another initiative is that they want to hire 500 more employees only for research and development in Canada. So we see that Huawei sees Canada as a huge growth potential. But what is stopping Huawei from enjoying the growth that comes from Canada? So we foresee 2 key challenges that Huawei needs to overcome if it has to grow in the future. The first is the short-term issue, which is the lack of trust that is currently present in the market towards Huawei due to the scandals it is involved in, or rather the allegations that has been put on Huawei. The first is the perceived security risk. So what is all this about? It's about the allegations of spy activities that is associated with Huawei's telecom equipment, and this has been, the allegations has come from US Congress report, and what it has done is it has not only alienated the US market, but it has also made us, it has also Australia has also banned Huawei from its country, and we see India and UK also increasing the government scrutiny that has come to the company, and therefore we see a huge amount of negative press and mistrust in the market. The second is, of course, dumping, which are claims made by European Union that we are adopting cheap loans from the Chinese government. So therefore, Huawei needs to regain the trust in the market and build confidence. And the second issue is a longer term issue. Some questions that Huawei needs to answer is that which segment in the telecommunications market does it want to focus in Canada in particular, and how should it position itself in the Canadian market to reap long-term growth. And therefore, there's a need for strategic action and a recommendation to grow its long-term revenue and market position. Therefore, allow me to introduce to you our two-pronged strategy for Huawei today. The first is to regain trust in the short run, which will also help us in the long run. And the next is to conquer growth for the short-term benefit for Huawei's growth. Now, I'll pass my time to Zehab, which will take over the first strategy.
All right, thank you, Ruchi. Now, let us go through our first trust of our recommendation, which is to regain trust. Now, trust is an immediate concern. Canada right now shows much promise as our future market, but is deterred from a lack of trust. This is due to poor perceived reputation, due to allegations, as Ruchi has mentioned, from dumping and cybersecurity risks. This is a huge concern, as we can easily follow the scenarios laid out in Australia and India, where if the government feels that Huawei poses a national security risk, you're out of the game. So we have to find a way to communicate and to regain trust among the government, as well as our partners and consumers within the Canadian market. And we feel that this is an excellent place for us to start a strong communication strategy to regain trust due to a few key assets to leverage on. Firstly, it's a strong investment in Ottawa, such as an investment center, as well as local partnerships with other carriers such as Bell. And we feel that this will allow us to communicate to the Canadians that we're here to stay. Additionally, we also want to leverage off the largely positive relationship with the Canadian government and our strong current position in the market as a telecoms equipment provider. So moving on, our strategy for trust is a two-pronged approach. We feel that we can inspire trust by tackling it from two ends. Firstly, from the customer and consumer end, as well as the legislative end. For the customer and consumer end, we want to deal with the very basics of inspiring trust, communications. We want to start to tell Huawei stories in Canada, showing the voices of Ottawa, how we have managed to impact the lives of the people there, and that we are there to stay. Additionally, we want to give strong open disclosure on our operations to go against the allegations of dumping. Additionally, on the legislative side, we want to increase vested interest to inspire more confidence from the government. And we have several board recommendations here, the first of which is to introduce share ownership from the government's end, as well as to institute a governance board for cyber risk in Canada. So let us first go and look into the most important stakeholder, the government. The government controls telecoms policies and the market in Canada, so it serves as our key stakeholder to tackle first. Our approach to this is two-pronged. Firstly, through a share ownership approach, and secondly, through a governance board. Our first strategy is to sell 10% of shareholdings of Huawei Canada to the government. We realize this is a very bold and gutsy move, but we feel that at Huawei Canada, as a privately owned enterprise, has the leverage to do so. And this will allow us to gain alignment between Huawei Canada and the Canadian government. Additionally, this is also a practice that's adopted by other MNCs, such as Indorama, to facilitate its expansion in the Nigerian economy. The benefits, of course, for the Canadian government are obvious. Firstly, they will have interest in one of the biggest telco equipment players in their market. They will be able to use this to support their local carriers as well as enterprises, and this will serve as a key investment for the Canadian Pension Fund, which is very big in Canada. Moving on, our next strategy is to establish a cyber risk governance board run by independent advisors and members to govern the cyber risk of Huawei operations. As consultants to Huawei, we truly believe in the integrity of its operations, whether it be cyber risk or for dumping, and we believe that by introducing an external governing board focusing on this issue, you can inspire the trust that you need from consumers and from the corporate world. The members will include people nominated from the government, as well as World Trade Organization members. And these members will be able to initiate investigation and establish reporting, as well as spot checking protocols for Huawei Canada. We believe with this, we'll be able to inspire trust on the legislative end. Moving on to the customer and consumer side, we feel that the focus should be on communications and closing your efforts in Canada. We have to admit, you've done an amazing job of investing yourself in Canada with your investments through the R&D hub in Ottawa, collaboration with Carleton University, as well as partnerships with key carriers such as TELUS and Bell. All of these, however, are largely focused in the Ottawa region, and we feel that the rest of Canada should know of this as well, and should make communications of your investment in Canada public knowledge. This is important because essentially public sentiment is what's going to pressure the government to take action against you as well. So this is something we want to leverage on. So additionally, we also want to emphasize that you have fair and honest operations, and that we want to go against the accusations of dumping. And the best way to do so is to actually have perfect disclosure on the way you are supporting your operations, and to do so through your annual reports. We feel that this can be done through 3 phases of communication. Firstly, by establishing comms, by announcing your stance on the cybersecurity and dumping issues. We want to ensure key channels through own media such as Twitter, Facebook, as well as your corporate website, to ensure that communications with stakeholders are well managed. Next, we want to communicate your stories. As mentioned, you have invested heavily in the Ottawa region, and we want to use own media to share these stories, sharing the voices in Ottawa through a video documentary on the ongoing works and R&D innovations there to share with the rest of Canadians. Lastly, we want to retain confidence within the Canadian consumer that Huawei Canada is here to stay. And this involves communicating and announcing the collaborations that we want to do with the Canadian government, as mentioned earlier, to share ownership, as well as a corporate governance board, as well as establish crisis management protocols in response to crises such as the announcement made by the US government prior. So with both of these, we feel that you will be able to inspire trust in Huawei Canada. This will serve as your most immediate issue to tackle before you can tackle long-term growth in Canada. And with the customer and consumer side, we increase transparency as well as communications with the market. And on the legislative side, we increase the alignment and shared interest with the government so that you can be here to stay. Now I'll pass the time on to Jeremy to share more on how can we capitalize growth in Canada.
Thank you. Our second strategy talks about conquer. After we regain trust in the short term with our stakeholders, the next thing in mind is how Huawei can continue to consolidate its growth in Canada, and we'll be looking at analyzing the current situation that Huawei has in Canada right now, as well as look at how they can better position themselves in the industry and capture greater market share. We first look at the current situation that Huawei has in Canada market. Huawei has a very unique strategy in terms of international expansion, and they believe in globalization. There are 2 key features of globalization. Firstly, going global, and secondly, staying local. They believe in tapping on their expertise, such as the cheap, low-cost production in China, and after that, customizing its services and products to the local markets and being relevant within the local market. You have achieved reasonable success over the past 5 years from 2008 by expanding from just 1 offices to multiple offices, and just recently establishing a 5-year investment in an R&D facility in Ottawa specializing in 5G technology. Not only that, there are huge opportunities available in the Canadian market with strong government support in terms of investments, as well as in terms of licenses and approval of your technology. And not only that, the mobile take-up rate is only at 81%, which is much lower than other developed countries, and this presents opportunity for Huawei. However, there are 2 key issues that we have identified today within your presence in the Canadian market. The first is the lack of collaboration between business segments. We have earlier identified that there are 3 key business segments that Huawei is currently involved in right now, mainly focusing on carrier business, also having some exposure in terms of the enterprise solutions they're providing to MNCs, as well as the retail outlet by selling hardware like mobile phones as well as tablets. However, there's no current tapping of the synergy between these business segments that you have right now, and we believe that we can help you to do that. The second issue is that it's a very highly competitive environment, with 2 key competitors such as Ericsson as well as Nokia Siemens having 35% market share and 20% market share, focusing on just the carrier segments. And they have recently moved up from the enterprise and retail segment, and we see that there's an opportunity for you to expand your solutions. So the implications of these 2 issues is clear. There's a need for Huawei to clearly position themselves in the long run to capture more market share within Canada. So what we propose today is to have a very clear positioning with 3 key features. Firstly, there's a need for Huawei to be a provider of holistic solutions, not just focusing on just carrier, but also that of enterprise as well as retail. The second is there's a wide network they want to provide within the whole country. And the last is a vested interest within the local community. Let me elaborate. The first recommendation that we have today is for Huawei to tap on the different cross business segments that it has right now in these 3 business segments. And the reason why we propose this is because we believe there's huge synergy they can tap on from the carrier as well as the enterprise solutions, when the technology used for providing solutions and equipment are actually pretty similar. And this is a way for you to bundle your services to provide to telecommunication operators. Not only that, there's a lack of such competitive player in the market right now, with both Siemens as well as Nokia moving out from these segments and focusing on just carrier. So our idea today is to bundle the services that Huawei can provide to the telecommunication operators by selling not only just carrier equipment and services, but also that of enterprise equipment solutions together with your retail mobile phones. What does it mean is that the telecommunication operators will be able to offer more offerings to its end consumers by not only providing reliable network services, we'll also be able to sell phones from Huawei as well as provide enterprise solutions to MNCs. And this is currently a model that is being used in areas such as Singapore and Asia. The second recommendation we have is for Huawei to position itself as a telecommunication operator with a wide network within Canada. We understand that Canada is a huge, vast land area and is highly populated only in the west, which all the other tele operators are currently present right now. In the west, such as Ottawa, in east, such as Ottawa, where most of the tele operators are present right now, most operators are able to provide services in the northwest region, which is the more mountainous areas. And we believe that one strategy for Huawei going forward is to embrace the building of telecommunication services and equipment in these areas, whereby you are able to aggregate the regional operators, the smaller regional operators, and allow them to have a reliable services countrywide. And we believe that is a strong positioning that Huawei can allow itself to differentiate from its other two competitors. The last recommendation that we have today is to have a continuous vested interest in the Canadian community. Not only should we treat it as a short-term solution to communicate to our stakeholders that's important that we have a vested interest in the Canadian community, we also see a strong importance in showing that in the long run. And we see that by giving recommendations on managing 3 different key stakeholders that we see crucial for our business, specifically there are regulations, bodies, local hiring policy, which we recommend that you can increase from the 70% overseas hires to now to 85%, such as to show the commitment within the community that we are here in Canada for the long run. One interesting point that I would like to share is that you have strong involvement in campuses, but we have another interesting recommendation where you can look at not just investing in programs within campuses, but to start up a venture capital corporate incubator, whereby you are looking at investing in enterprising startups, which is a very crucial factor in the telecommunications industry, especially with many disruptive technologies sprucing up, such as WhatsApp as well as Viber, that all started up from the startup scene. And by being active on the startup scene and actively investing in these startups from the startup phase, you are able to touch grounds on the technologies that are available, as well as be able to invest and see how you can incorporate these technologies within Huawei's suite of services. Now I'll pass on the time to Samuel to talk about the financials.
So before we move on to the financials, let me touch on the implementation timeline. We have run through a short, medium, long-term plan for you guys, and we'll be happy to share with you more in the Q&A. As for the risk and mitigation plan, we have highlighted 3 key risks that you might face as you implement our recommendation, including, for example, for the first recommendation to regain trust, continuing media backlash might still occur. So we have a trigger point where we identify what indicator do we look at. For example, no improvement in market sentiments about how our company Huawei is. Therefore, we will proceed further to engage opinion leaders as well as set up conferences to engage our stakeholders and to reinforce to them our stand. And now I will be more than happy to touch on the other risks, but now let me touch on what we are more interested in, which is the financials. With our implementation, we look at a continuous CAGR growth of 16.3% up to 2019. And what is important in this is that there will be increased contribution by Canada, meaning to say Canada will be the portion that will fuel this growth, as well as for the customer segment, we are looking at increasing proportion coming from enterprise as we invest into wide areas, untapped regions, as well with our bundled service. We believe that we are able to deliver the growth that your company is looking for.
In conclusion, by first regaining trust and by then conquering growth, we are We are confident that your company can not only overcome the current challenges, but also emerge stronger in the future with more growth potential. So thank you very much for your attention. We'll be now taking any questions.
Gentlemen, you're free to ask questions, and I'll put up a 3-minute reminder and a 1-minute.
So let me start, and firstly, thank you so much. I think you were very well done. You spoke in your second part of the strategy, which is the conquer part of it. You spoke about the countrywide network coverage and vast land, very sparsely networked. Did you look at the cost of setting up a network all across Canada? Because it is indeed a large land. It's not very well networked, but there are only 34 million people living in Canada.
Okay.
So the cost of providing network, and that's probably the reason why there's no network in so many of these places, because there's not enough population to support it. So what's your reasoning and logic behind that investment?
Okay, sure. Maybe I'd like to take on your question. Thank you for your question. The reason why we suggested this recommendation, not only just from a strategic point of view, we see that to allow Huawei to stand out as a telco operator, but to answer your question on from a feasibility point of view, whether or not could it be even financially feasible to set up such, for example, setting up satellites within the mountainous regions. The answer to that is that our research has shown that there are currently 9 regional operators within Canada, and these regional operators are smaller players as compared to the key national carriers that we see. We see a potential opportunity for these 9 regional carriers to aggregate and to bid for licenses, to bid for equipments that Huawei can provide for them. So one such example that we see is that recently the second and the third tele operator actually collaborated together to bid for the same facility in order to extend the network that they can provide for its consumers in order to overcome the market leader, which is Rogers, yes, which is Rogers, another company. And that itself actually set up some trend which we foresee that in the coming future, the other 9 regional operators, or even collaborating with the second and third operators, to come together to provide services that is increasingly needed by consumers within Canada itself. So whether or not, in terms of capex, there might be potential spending, but as long as tele operators are willing to provide that kind of services for its end consumers, we as equipment provider will also be willing to put up the cost and offer such solutions to our tele operators. Yeah, hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Can I add to that? If our initial strategy of working more closely, the Canadian government can also succeed as well. We can also leverage off that to actually extend the foray towards the other more mountainous regions, because essentially not only do businesses benefit when we expand our outreach to other regions, the Canadian government and Canada itself does benefit as well. So we do see an alignment in these interests.
Which is the bigger or the most attractive profit pool? Is it the carrier or is it the enterprise? It's an extension of the question, because do we really need to go nationwide and be the carrier? Is that the market you want to focus on, or should we focus on enterprise market?
So currently right now, enterprise market is only 5% of overall contribution as compared to 75% for carriers. So that said, we believe that carriers, for one, there's a high profit margin. That is why we are there in the first place, and that contributes so much to our revenue. But then again, we recognize the potential and the opportunity within the enterprise space, because 2 of the main competitors has backed out, and this allows us to come in, and we believe that increasingly over time this will be a larger increasing contributor to our revenue.
And in that, extending that question, you spoke about the anti-dumping and the issues that what about China government or CDB, which is a partner bank, actually helping fund some of those carriers to actually buy those equipment? So it's not that they're funding Huawei in terms of actually giving them cheap loans, but they're actually funding the carriers in Canada. Is that something you guys thought about?
We see dumping as more of an allegation rather than substantiating that Huawei actually participates in dumping, because we understand that there's a difference between having an unfair play in a market and providing a cheaper service than your competitors. So Huawei has openly admitted that they do not endorse any kind of dumping, or for that matter, the other scandal that has come in play as well. So we don't see that. We see that as a communication issue which we have to tackle with the government of the country we are operating in and with the consumers there. So we don't see that as a fundamental issue with the company.
Sure, I understand that. The question was more whether is there an opportunity to use CDB as a financing partner for the carriers. You're not only kind of bringing them a lower priced equipment, but in fact financing from something like a CDB. Is that something?
Okay, I understand where you're coming from, sir. But because we are pitching from the perspective of Huawei, we have no say on whether CDP, which is essentially one of our financiers, will be able to be part of our recommendation to help the tele operators in terms of their financing. So hope that kind of clarifies where the direction we're coming from, because we are coming from the direction of Huawei trying to solve the issue of dumping allegations as well as security interest issues. So whether or not CDP will be a tool that we can use to finance our tele operators as part of our strategy, I think the feasibility is something that we are not very confident about. So that's why we didn't consider it as an option.
Oh,
sure, thank you.
I certainly sort of like the consideration that you've gone into in terms of the strategy, in terms of the solution, and quite a few viable solutions. Just on the area when you actually touch on government, which is the main area. So if none of those two main solutions, the shareholding in terms of 10%, if that doesn't go ahead, or some teams sort of block it, what is the alternative? And likewise, in terms of the second part, which is the independent board for cyber risk. Obviously, the incident happened in 2012, and it's 3 years has passed, and then we either missed the board or we haven't done it. So I'm just thinking that on those two solutions, can you elaborate, or if they don't happen, what is your alternative?
Okay, maybe you can tackle the first one, which is basically getting the government on board for a 10% shareholding in Huawei Canada. While we feel that is the most preferred option in basically aligning our interests between Huawei Canada and the Canadian government, we do realize that there can be certain difficulties in implementing it. Under such a scenario, we can sort of leverage what Jeremy has previously mentioned, which is to look towards cooperating with the government towards launching aggregating demand in those mountainous areas. So we can do something of a less involved venture with the government by basically going to what Jeremy has mentioned. We believe that that will be somewhat less of involvement on the government side, and it will be a high possibility of working out.
And to build on that, what we want to achieve at the end of the day is to regain the trust of our stakeholders, the government, as well as the people and our customers. So for example, if that doesn't pull off, we have our second part of the plan to develop these areas, strongly communicate to the people that we are here to stay, we are not here to profit off you, we are here to help develop the country as well. So with this two-pronged approach, we believe that we can communicate clearly that we are not here just to profit from you, we are here to help build the country, and this itself create a kind of rapport and a trust that we hope to achieve with our two recommendations.
Another way that I can think about as part of our mitigation plans, if the government does not want to partake in the 10% shareholding that we have offered to them, there are also different kind of channels that we can align the interests of Huawei with that of the government stakeholders. For example, we actually thought of engaging the pension fund within Canada, which is actively investing in assets across the world. And we believe that's one way where we can offer equity to them. And another way that we can look at it is, in fact, partnering with state-owned telecommunication operators, which is a very traditional model whereby most telecommunication operators are actually owned by the state, which essentially is by the Canadian government. So there might not be a direct investment by the government if there are some controversies behind it, but we can find other channels that we can still align the interests between Huawei and the stakeholders. Thank you.
One question in terms of the positioning, and I think Jeremy, you spoke about that, and it's clearly an opportunity. But the way you positioned it in your solution was as a holistic provider, which for me is not positioning, because then you're saying you do anything and everything. So, and I'm not saying I'm right or wrong.
Okay.
I just want you to defend it or explain it a little better to me.
Okay, the reason why we decided to position in such a way that is still holistic, which may not sound like a positioning, I understand where you're coming from, is because when we look at the two other competitors within the market, they are highly specialized in just the carrier segment, and specifically that of 4G LTE segments in the mobile industry. So they are very specialized. For example, in Siemens, they are only looking at that segment and providing the equipment for that specific customers. And for Siemens as well, for Nokia Siemens as well, they are also looking at specific segments. So that's why when we look at the comparative positioning, we are looking at providing more than what our competitors can do by providing holistic solutions, because we understand that that's what telecommunication operators are looking out for. They're not just looking at building a satellite for 4G LTE. Sometimes they are looking out for providing solutions for all the different kind of technology as well as for different kind of products. So that's something that Huawei can do for telecommunication operators, and we believe there's a unique positioning within the Canadian market in relative to the other competitors. Yeah, so hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Yes.
We're going to give you the opportunity to present your numbers since you sort of run out of time. So if you want to sort of share with us how good your P&L sort of analysis.
Okay. So briefly for financials, we are looking at a projection 5 years forward. So we have used a CAGR of 16.3%, which is what Huawei has been growing the past few years, and we believe that 16.3%, given the recommendation that we are doing and the increased competition, that how we can expand is a conservative estimate. But more importantly, what is driving this growth? We have seen that from our recommendation, Canada has a bigger part to play in Huawei now that they're investing a lot in terms of R&D and in terms of building up networks and engaging stakeholders in the area. So we're looking at increasing from 14% to 20% given our recommendation, because we're looking at huge potential in terms of investing in untapped areas as well as our bundled services. And that itself, we look at for customer segment, you can see that we have seen an increase from 5 to 15% for enterprise, largely driven by our focus and we see an opportunity that translates to the increase in contribution by this segment. And for retail and carriers, for that, we see that they will continue to grow at a fast rate, also at an increased rate due to our bundled service. So that is a brief breakdown of our numbers and figures for financials.
Thank you.
Or the recent mitigation. Implementation. Okay. And as well, okay, now that we have time, we can interest you with our implementation timeline. What to do next? Okay, so actually for the management point of view, you want to know, like tomorrow when you get back to office, what you want to do next. So for regaining our trust, we will start off with enacting the shareholder plans, getting the numbers worked out, as well as begin to establish communication with our customers. So that is the important thing that you can do straight away. As for conquering growth, right now what is important as a company is, as we have set positioning, we also have to communicate internally what the company position is to allow for alignment there. So we believe that first thing you can do is to communicate this positioning, as well as in the longer run, also to short to middle run, develop our bundled packages, and lastly, in the middle to long run, really market and sell this to our customer. So this is a brief outline of what we can see with our recommendation, translated in across the time.
Thank you. Q, I have a non-technical question for you. How did you organize yourself? When you got the case, what did you say? You take this, or you read this part of it?
When we get the case, we all, of course, take some time, about 30 minutes to read the case, and then we come together and discuss what is our perspective, what do we think are the core issues that the company is facing, and what's the direction that they should go to. And then we do have a separate distinction in the sense, I'm always the passive opens and those kind of informal
Richard Jenny settles the analysis, and then me and Jeremy will set the recommendations, and Sarah has a tough job of rounding us up with implementation, risk, and mitigation.
Yeah.
But while we split up the different work streams, there's always a lot of communication all around to make sure it's aligned throughout the different recommendations.
Thank you. Well done, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You don't need to get up, absolutely not.
No, we will get up.